I bet at least one of you had a situation when you as a DM planned a scene that was epic, cool, and dramatic, but when you actually were playing this engaging and fun scene, one of your players said, actually, that thing that you just did is historically and lore inaccurate. And there you go on to explain why you did such an atrocity towards historical accuracies, as well as the in-game lore. Or maybe you just had a good time as a player when you did something cool during the scene, and suddenly this guy jumps out shouting, actually, you did very inaccurate thing, how dare you! So, in my opinion, in D&D, historical accuracy doesn't matter at all, or matters in a very little way. Wait, stop, put down the torches, leave those forks, and allow me to explain. Because if we establish why we care about historical accuracy in modern media, the answer to the matter of historical accuracy in these fantasy games about going through dungeons in order to beat dragons, or going through dragons in order to beat dungeons, will become a lot clearer. So, what is special with this historical accuracy? Why so many people seem to care about it so much? And why the heck do we think about historical accuracy in a fantasy game about magic and dragons? So, the term historical accuracy is usually used to judge the accuracy of a media that claims to be based around our real world history. Logical, isn't it? Whatever is something like a completely fictional story that is placed in a historical setting, like the Inglorious Bastards, or a story about a historical figure or an event with the Napoleon movie as an example for the latter part. Usually, one of the first criticisms that appears when a movie is somehow tied to a historical subject is that, well, the movie is historically inaccurate. Which is logical, if not even a natural thing to do for us. When we are presented with a piece of culture that claims to be based on our past, we confront that information from the piece of culture that we just watched with other sources to judge how real it was. And oftentimes we are disappointed to find out that, for the most part, the movie that we just watched was complete and pure fiction, with some historical add ons. Well, that's because if we watch something that advertises itself as being historical, we expect it to be, let's guess together, accurate. Thus, an inaccurate thing can be unsatisfying to watch for people who are previously interested in the subject and also cause misinformation among others. Ultimately, historical accuracy matters for some of us because, as I said, if we are interested in a topic, we won't like it to be misrepresented, which could also cause our believability of a story to fall. Now, we have finally uncovered the reason why we care about historical accuracy, which is because producing inaccurate products claiming to be historical can spread misinformation and cause the believability of a culture piece to drop significantly. Since we play in a fantasy game where the history is completely fictional, the first part becomes irrelevant, and now the part that's tied to believability starts being the most important. Of course, some fantasy authors like George R. R. Martin incorporate real world history elements into their stories. But we need to remember that Martin's world is severely lower in the magic spectrum than most of our D&D worlds, which I bet won't be especially historically accurate. Just consider how much of an impact on our real world would have the low level, actually the first level, paladin ability, which allows them to basically cure one person from cancer once per day. And there are much more abilities like that, which would revolutionize our world. I believe this ensures that historical accuracy in D&D doesn't matter, and the players mostly don't even care about it. And the thing that they really care about is having believable consequences to their actions in a somewhat believable setting. And suddenly, we have to balance the sense of wonder with the believability in order to have a nice background for our campaign. Now, how to balance all of that so that we'll end up with our sessions so perfectly believable that our players would think, yeah, that could happen in this world, while still achieving that sense of wonder of playing in our fantasy world. The first thing that I will start with is closely tied to world building, because it's about thinking of some impacts that the magic or any other unique detail, see my world building video if you want to know more, will impact our world. For example, in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight archive, we have highly dangerous and consistent high storms, which are a serious threat. Like when someone would came to you and say, "Storms! A storming storm is coming!" People would probably go to their homes immediately in order to secure themselves from the deadly environment of the storm. In D&D, you can take that to the extreme. This is the game where magic makes you almost a godlike creature. Imagine a world where, thanks to spells like Plant Growth, Fabricate, or Goodberry, the usually useless rock that Britannia colonized during the time when they ruled the waves become useful rocks. And you know that big, icy, useless regions of Greenland and Antarctica? Yeah, they could also be turned into highly developed places. Another thing you can do in order to improve the believability of the story that you are trying to tell is to allow your players to build upon their abilities, mixing them together in what we may even think as of weird ways. For me, this makes sense because we want our hard magic to allow us to make funny stuff with it. And I don't mean letting your players to do something cool and then just leaving it there. No, think about the ways your spell combos will influence the world that you play in. For example, let's say that your players got into some shenanigans with the Magic Mouth spell and suddenly your world has internet connection and easily accessible information. How that will impact your world is a question to you as the DM, and if you make something with that, your players will think, "Oh, he cares about our actions." Now, when you have finally established all of the ties between our special details, we need to stay consistent with our world building and the campaign that we are running. Small inconsistencies will probably go unnoticed, but if we would say something like, in my world there are those magical woods, which are the only place where we have this special creature. And then we suddenly introduce a pack of such creatures in, let's say, middle of a desert. Your players might be like, okay, what are those creatures doing here? And now, as a DM, if you haven't noticed the inconsistency, you have to improvise. And being honest, if the story that you'll tell will be improvised, it may be ultimately unsatisfying. After all, I think the two of the most rightfully hated fantasy shows have believability problems, which are one of the many reasons of hatred towards the series. For example, can you explain how magic works in The Witcher by Netflix? Actually, The Witcher has soft magic, and you don't need to know how does it work. To that, I respond, there is more to soft magic than being just like, the magic works just as the wizard intends, because we have to make some plot point to be solved. Or, I don't know, why are the Harfoots in Rings of Power like no one walks alone? Except, of course, for those who stay behind to get eaten? Now, we need to note that consistency is both the hardest and the easiest to handle, because in theory, all you need to do is to stick to what you had already created. However, you might often be like, yo, this is the best thing that I have ever created, to come to the realization a little later that this breaks some rules that you've already established. So, the first thing that I will recommend as a possible solution is highly tied to the aspect of world building again, and it's world building just for story relevancy, and leaving some blank spaces to expand on later. Leaving those gaps will allow us to use something that we hadn't originally intended to have in our campaign and connect it somehow to our world building. But if you so far enjoyed my tips and this video as a whole, I recommend you to like and subscribe so that you won't miss any of our future creations. If you want to discuss your cool world building and D&D in general ideas, join our Discord server, the link is in the description. And finally, you have to make the stakes of your campaign feel real and present throughout the whole campaign. If your PCs had angered the rulers of a city, which are particularly influential, those rulers could, and probably would, send out mercenaries, assassins, and other deadly things to follow the players, hunt them down, bring them to them, kill them. I don't know, it's your creativity, your work. And that's how to improve the believability of your D&D campaign. I plan to make more videos on topics surrounding improving D&D campaigns, and if you like that and want to know more on this subject, leave a like, comment and subscribe to the channel.